Hello, thank you for listening to this presentation on Atlantic mackerel rebuilding. My name is Jason Didden. I'm the council staffer for this action. My contact info is there if anyone has any follow-up questions. Just reviewing when public comments can be taken. We have hearings April 25 to May 2nd, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Maine evening hearings, and also a May 2nd webinar. Written comments are due May 9. If you go to our website, it has all the details on hearing locations and times, webinar connection information, and how to submit written comments. So, purposes of this action: rebuild the Atlantic mackerel stock and set 2023 specifications or quotas and management measures. So, kind of how did this all start? Well, we had a 2018 benchmark assessment that found the stock was overfished, with overfishing occurring in 2016. It, projecting a few years in advance, thought we'd be around 160,000 metric tons with the initial rebuilding plan, or starting the initial rebuilding plan. And in 2021, we had a new assessment, found it was still overfished, with overfishing occurring through 2019, and that the biomass was only about 40,000 metric tons in 2019 versus 160,000 metric tons we thought we'd have at that point. So obviously, even projecting 3 years into the future, there's a lot of uncertainty there. The trend is positive, up about 180% since 2014, but still only a quarter rebuilt. So again, these forward projections kind of highlights their uncertainty. Again, sticking with the current assessment, just trends in fishing mortality. You can see the fishing mortality ramping up through 2010. It's come down quite a bit since then, but still overfishing in the terminal year of 2019. That lower dashed horizontal line is the overfishing threshold. Stock size, SSB, that's what determines if the stock is overfished or not. Still below that lower dashed overfished line, so the stock is still overfished. And the trends here, you can see those pops in stock size in the mid 80s, mid 2000s. Those are the results of a good year class. But again, we haven't seen that in a while, and we're overfished currently. So once you get below that overfished threshold, that bottom dash line, the law says you have to rebuild back to the target in 10 years or less. Catch history, just for perspective, that large foreign fishery evident in the 70s, more Canadian and domestic and JV in the 80s, and then Canadian and domestic fishery in the mid 2000s. The foreign fishery was phased out in the 70s. We had the JV, or the joint venture, in the 80s. Not since 92 though, only Canadian and domestic landings. And recreational is the black line in between the bottom blue and the kind of mustard color. Recreational catch relatively small through the time series, but catch is so low in recent years that it is more of a proportion of total catch than it's been in the past. So all of the rebuilding options, look at 10-year rebuilding. Our Scientific and Statistical Committee advised taking a long-term approach, indicating that rebuilding is so dependent on getting typical recruitment. You're probably in for a long-haul endeavor here. That said, we're only setting specifications for 2023 right now. We're going to get a new assessment in 2023. Every other year, we get a new assessment. And 2023 is already 4 years of projections out from 2019. We saw the last time even 3 years we were off by a factor of 4. So 2024 is probably going to change, and we're just setting for 2023 now until we get that new assessment in 2023 that we could use to set for 2024 and beyond. So what measures is the council considering? Lower commercial quotas. There's also a river herring and shad cap for the mackerel fishery that has been in place since 2014. Commercial minimum mesh, either a 10 or 15 fish recreational possession limit, and both, well, for hire and commercial anyway, looking to clarify some permitting and reporting requirements. The regs are currently unclear whether any possession of any mackerel in the EEZ triggers federal permitting and reporting requirements. So this action would clarify it one way or the other. The 5 rebuilding options, they all rebuild in 10 years if we get that expected recruitment. One uses low recruitment throughout. 4 start with low recruitment and then increase toward typical recruitment through the rebuilding period. We'll call them low R and R+. Another critical background information for evaluating the rebuilding options. The council has what we call the P-star risk policy deduction. And at lower biomass, for most fisheries, they're just operating, they're not overfished, the council is setting catches. The risk policy deduction requires a greater certainty about not overfishing when biomass is lower. That translates into lower catch. It's normally applied to an overfishing mortality rate, but it can apply to any F rate, including a rebuilding F. So one of the options uses this risk policy buffering on a rebuilding F. One of the rebuilding options uses just a standard risk policy deduction. These are the 5 options, just kind of laying out a quick summary. And the main thing I want to highlight at this point is that there's quite a wide range of initial catches, anywhere from 700 metric tons to about 9,400 metric tons for 2023. So a wide range in how these plans start. They all get to the same endpoint, given the expected recruitment. The lower catch earlier tends to lead to higher catch later, and the higher catches earlier lead to a slower increase through the rebuilding period. So what do we do with those total catches? The plan has set up that Canadian landings, recreational catch, and commercial discards have to be deducted in order to get the remainder of the commercial quota. So for Canadian landings, what are we going to do with Canada? Canada landed 4,395 metric tons in 2021. They've closed their commercial fishery in 2022. Their 2023 quota will be based on an updated assessment. Their fisheries minister makes a decision, and they are supposed to take a precautionary approach when their stock is low. That's what led them to closing in 2022. But it's uncertain what they're going to do in 2023 because they're going to have a new assessment. So the 2 options in the document are to either use their 2021 catch of 4,395 metric tons or half that, 2,197. Given the history of catches, given we don't know what they're going to do for their assessment, that's has been considered a reasonable range, one of these 2. And they could set it higher or lower for 2023. We don't know. But again, based on what they did for 2022, based on their history of recent quotas, that's been deemed a reasonable amount. We also have to deduct predicted recreational catch. The 5-year average for recreational catch is 2,582 metric tons. And the council, as I said, is considering 2 bagger possession limits, 10 or 15 fish. On paper, on a spreadsheet, the 10 fish limit seems like it, if you take the higher trips and say what happens if they only caught 10, it looks like you might get a 30% reduction in recreational catch. If you take the higher trips and push them down to 15, it looks like you might have a 22% reduction. We haven't had recreational possession limits with Atlantic mackerel before. Don't really know, what the results of these going to be. How are people going to, kind of react to these? And so the plan is to take basically, either stick with just taking the recent 5-year average, or even if a new possession limit is implemented, or take half of the theoretical predicted reduction. And that way we don't end up under specifying for recreational catch and having and setting the rebuilding plan back because we didn't set aside enough for expected recreational catch. Recent years, recreational catch of Atlantic mackerel has been pretty stable, but looking at the time series, there can be some substantial variability year to year. So that'd be another reason not to go down too low on how much to set aside for recreational catch. Commercial discards, I've been deducting 115 metric tons. They've generally been low. That we have to account for that, but it doesn't have much of an impact on things. So the remainder is the commercial quota. Going back to these 2023 catches, 3 of them have total catches that if you take 2,000 or 4,000 out for Canada, you take 2,000 to 3,000 out for recreational catch, you may have negative U.S. catch or negative U.S. quota or 0 U.S. commercial quota. What does that do to discards? Can we monitor things? It seems like 1, 2, and 3 are so low that they may not be practicable. 4 and 5 do have enough catch. Again, considering what we have to account for with Canada and recreational catch to be feasible to implement, and they still rebuild. I'm going to talk about those a little bit more. But if folks have questions about the others after I'm done, I have some discussion, happy to go into more detail on those. So alternative 4, the total catch here was 8,094 metric tons. And so this table and the table in the document just kind of goes through what happens if you take out the lower or the higher amount for Canadian catch. What happens if you take a lower or higher amount for rec catch? Discards, again, no change there. And so depending on, you can see you end up with a commercial quota between about 1,000 metric tons and 3,600 metric tons for alternative 4, depending on what's taken out for Canada and rec. And then there are some closure triggers that kind of slow the fishery down as the fishery approaches the quota. So for alternative 5, everything is just scaled up a little bit. Again, you're changing the overall ABC here from now up a little higher to 9,400 metric tons just about. And this, again, going through the same process of deducting different amounts for expected Canadian catch, for rec catch, and then there's discards. So here you get a commercial quota in the range of about 2,300 metric tons to 4,900 metric tons. So the Scientific and Statistical Committee has provided some advice and considerations. They've said these higher catches through the rebuilding periods are really dependent on higher recruitment. It's important to keep that in mind. There's a lot of uncertainty if that occurs, how it occurs, when it occurs. Also, if we're having such small catches and trying to figure out what that means for biomass trends, trying to account for that is difficult, and what is the precision on those. Also may start getting very limited fishery dependent data. The catch from the recreational and commercial fisheries feeds the assessment, and if we stop getting that, it may lead to greater uncertainty. And then if you have no landings, do you start creating discards? And if you have no catch, what do you have for fleet survival when hopefully we get to a rebuilt stock? Other considerations, again, it's just at these small changes in SSB, there's a lot of uncertainty. We already just kind of discussed the uncertainty we see in even projections of a few years. And they identified, really options that have at least a 60% chance or more are a lot more likely to succeed. Of the 2 we just looked at, option 4 did have over 60% probability of succeeding. Option 5 was a bit above 50%. The SSC actually recommended the P-star approach. Again, it doesn't seem practicable given the deductions we have to make, but it does fulfill the rebuilding requirements. It integrates new information easily. It does have the highest 10-year catch yield, and it is consistent with the existing risk policy. And it also has the potential to reduce year-to-year changes in the ABC. And that number 4, consistent with the existing risk policy, the current risk policy says that if you have a rebuilding catch that's above what you would otherwise see with the standard risk policy, that the standard risk policy becomes your default measure. And so those higher ABCs and the higher ABCs that we saw with 4 and 5 would just be overridden by P-star. So the 4 and 5, they require the council to make an affirmative kind of declaration that they're adjusting the risk policy, while the P-star here does not. One thing the SSC also, was recommending a better, providing a better sense of the uncertainty involved with rebuilding. And this figure from the assessment projections, these are the 5 colors here are the 5 rebuilding approaches. And the solid lines towards the middle, they all more or less end up at that dashed line is our target, and they end up around there. But even just looking at the P-star option, you can see that there's a lot of variability. Yes, that little circle, it ends up at the right spot, but there is a wide variability of trends here. And these projections are made by running thousands of simulations. And each run is ending up in a different spot. Some are high, some are low. There is this central tendency towards rebuilt, but you still have roughly a coin flip chance of being above or below these end goals, above or below being rebuilt at the end, and having that kind of uncertainty in mind when the council makes a decision was really something that the SSC wanted to highlight. So overall summary, the stock has declined. There's been a lot of historic overfishing last 30 years. Recovery depends on getting good recruitment and holding to the projected catches too. And lower recruitment is going to mean lower catches to rebuild, keep rebuilding, or taking longer to rebuild. Next steps, there's a committee meeting in May, council action in June. You can find that information on our website. And again, just public comment summary. We're taking comments now. You can submit comments for our website. We have the evening hearings coming up. Written comments are due May 9, and you can get details on our website of the hearings or how to submit comments. And to kind of focus, we're asking people to give us input on what do you support, what do you oppose, and what should the council think about when deciding this action. So thank you for your attention and listening to this overview of the macro rebuilding option. Again, my contact information was at the start of this. If anyone has any questions, feel free to contact me. Thank you.